Uh, Spending a little bit more on some of the use cases, I'm mindful that by and large, the audience is from the securities and capital markets group representing that industry. And blockchain clearly has paved and pushed itself into this particular domain. Clearly, over $1 billion were invested alone in 2017 for blockchain-related projects in capital markets. That's a huge number, and about 15% of companies have reported that they have moved on successfully. They've gone live on production environment and deployed at least one blockchain solution. It could be around payments, could be around smart contracts, but we clearly see, and 15% is not a bad number at all, given the nascent, uh, uh, given the newness and the nascent aspect of this technology. And we see exchanges also kind of embracing and adopting to the blockchain technology. A case in point is the ASX, Australian Stock Exchange. Um it's one of the largest exchanges in the world, and it has decided to replace its existing clearing and settlement system with a DLT alternative. And they are collaborating with a company called Digital Asset Holdings, which is an Australian based blockchain consulting company. And originally they were expected to go live in 2019/20, but some of the technology issues, some of the adoption issues, and the architecture is kind of delaying that process, along with some regulatory approvals. They're expected now to go live in 2022. But the fact of the matter is that uh, there is a clear adoption in one of the largest exchanges in the world from down under. So clearly we will see the ripple effect across other exchanges, other markets and geos in the years to come. A classic illustration in the securities and capital markets would be well-known trade and settlement cycle, right? I mean, there are different stages from the origination of a trade until the settlement of a trade. And within a blockchain network, this kind of seamlessly integrates and operates. As we speak, there are a lot of efficiencies that have been generated in various geographies and in various banks operating with regulators in America, in Europe, UK region, to actually have the underlying blockchain fabric, distributed ledger technology across the pre-trade and post-trade cycles. This slide actually depicts some of those efficiencies that will help not just through blockchain alone. So I also want to highlight that DLT is the underlying technology. It's the hash technology. It's a ledger technology that creates a certain sense of immutability, single version of truth, and all of that. But there are also other technologies, for example, artificial intelligence, video KYC, for example, right? Today, RBI has embraced from eKYC to vKYC, right? And that's a regulatory sandbox in itself, where several startups and established players were actually playing around before some of those technologies hit the market, right? Uh, so we see here that there is a convergence of technologies like AI, ML, machine learning, VR, and also virtual reality, and also some of the anti-money laundering logics, right? You have some of the fraud, cyber crimes, financial surveillance companies. An example could be FICO. Another example could be Actimize, right? You have a lot of these large players operating in this world, constantly refining their algorithms, constantly tuning their engines to reduce false positives and enhance true positives, and sharpen the accuracy, so to say. And all those get embedded in this network, only to create efficiencies across different stages of these processes, including custodial services. And that's where you have a good amount of reference data stored. You have a good amount of deduplication. We call it master data management in technology parlance. And that's a separate subject in itself. And blockchain kind of the technology helps the deduplication process be very seamless. You don't, because if you look at a core banking system of a bank, you will have uh, several names mapped to one address, several address mapped to one name, a name with a first name, middle name, last name can all be jumbled sometimes. And all of this is probably one customer identification folio ID, CIF ID, right? So how a CIF ID is actually getting cleaned at the backend system so that the entity and relationships are ideally correctly mapped. You will have Kannan Sriram, you will have K Sriram, you will have Sriram K, you will have Sriram Kannan, you will have Sri Sriram with probably 2 or 3 same addresses or different addresses. But how will the system know that it is all one CIF ID, right? And through a hash protocol, through deduplication engines, the system will be able to, the backend technologies will be able to map from the database tables that all of this permutation combination given a certain criteria is Kannan Sriram or Sriram Kannan, as the case may be, right? I mean, given a further documentary evidence of a KYC or an Aadhaar or a PAN, it goes to substantiate that all of these authentication mechanisms are ideally dealt with at a systemic level. The instance that I gave you was a core banking system, very similar in insurance, very similar in capital markets, in trades, right from origination until settlement. So the dedupe is one use case. There are several use cases where actually blockchain can help, and we will cover some of them also in addition to this. Another classic case is asset provenance, right? I mean, like I said earlier, blockchain typically creates as a technology fabric an immutability of records. It is, in technology parlance, the golden version or the golden source of truth that we call. You look up, if you come from a little bit of technology orientation or bent, you will understand that in database parlance, a golden version, a golden copy is the single version of truth for any data set or a table or a data warehouse or a data lake, right? You have these source systems having transactional data, OLTP data, online transaction processing data, that has a certain master data, which has a certain attribute, has a certain entity relationship, has a certain data model associated to it for reporting purposes. That golden copy of data is immutable in a blockchain ledger, in a blockchain fabric. It could be any of the Hyperledger fabric or R3, whatever the consortium may be, but the underlying DLT keeps it immutable. And one of the use cases is, I was personally involved, is one of the largest heavy equipment leaser and financier in India, headquartered in Kolkata. I'm not going to give out the name for client confidentiality reasons, but you probably know it already. So I was involved in a very interesting blockchain engagement. It's a digital transformation engagement, and blockchain, the larger piece is a digital transformation piece, of which blockchain was a very critical component. They were typically trying to understand their asset ledger a bit deeper. The assets include heavy equipments, your dumpers, tippers, JCBs, typically leased, loaned, financed to contractors who provide contractual services, building roads, building dams, constructing hospitals, constructing bridges, road over bridges, subways, underpasses, all of that, right? So typically that's the area where contractors operate. And a consortium was kind of so the problem statement is that this particular equipment financier had lost track of assets, right? I mean, they were not able to understand the depth of assets, the coverage of assets, the utilization of assets, There was increasing NPAs, non-performing loans in these assets. Contractors were not paying their dues on time. The charges created were far lower than what they should be. The expected useful life of the asset that was being put to use was unknown or was kind of, quite shady. They didn't even know if the asset was actually put to use, because the more the asset is put to use, the more the revenue is earned by the contractor, and therefore his ability to pay, leave the intent part, his ability to pay is increased. Of course, that gets realized only when the intention to pay is also there. That's a different subject matter. But all of this tracking became extremely difficult for the financier, for this particular equipment financier, right? So we suggested, as part of our digital transformation roadmap, as part of our digital transformation journey, we suggested that to address some of these problems, specifically this problem, and then a host of other peripheral problems, it would make sense to build a DLT structure around the digital assets and virtual assets and physical assets that actually helps resolve disputes, that brings a lot of trust and transparency to the system, a provenance should there be disputes, and also control, and also applying some of the AI ML concepts of predictability in terms of predicting revenues based on utilization of assets, based on deployment of assets. So all of that actually led to a very broad construct of a blockchain platform coming to life. And being a consortium play, bankers were involved, auditors and accountants were involved, attorneys and lawyers were involved, valuers, surveyors, and valuers were involved, and given the insurance agency being involved as well, technology partners were involved to build this actual technology for our client. So you clearly see a convergence of participants to solve a specific use case for the customer, right? So that's a clear uh, and to have one single version of truth, we call it system of record, right? An immutable system of record. So blockchain enabled, this technology enabled all of that to happen. So the diagram that you see is what I spoke earlier. Uh, and you can see various participants, you see external agencies, all of that. So hope this particular picture gives you the business context of that use case, as to how it actually came to life, including the OEMs. This is a larger, this is actually diving deep on that use case, which I said earlier. In the case of a new equipment purchase, the operation of that, the disposal of the asset, various parties involved, as you can see in the center, the banks, the consortium lenders, the financiers, the dealers, the OEMs, all of that, right? The insurers, all of that. So so that was the crux of the use case, and the intended benefits clearly a no-brainer, right? I mean, the problem statement was, as you can clearly see, lack of a shared, centralized, consistent data, poor traceability, poor visibility into monitoring of those assets, and all of that led to operational inefficiencies and somewhat of a regulatory non-compliance as well. And also the ability to predict revenues, quality revenues, right? It also affects your earnings and guidance and all of that, right? What you report to the markets. So all of that gets somewhat resolved. It's probably uh, too early to say that all problems have been solved. Blockchain will not solve all problems, much to the annoyance of what people think it will. But by and large, it has addressed many of critical business issues that this particular customer was actually going through at that point in time. This is a year and a half to 2 year old engagement, and the platform is currently operating at great efficiencies with more ecosystem players and a lot of contribution, and we're seeing a lot of benefits from this as well. Another use case which I was kind of involved in, this was at IBM, and this was an internal use case for IBM, basically to understand. So IBM has many vendors, right? Like any large corporation, IBM too has many suppliers, many vendors, and different payment terms negotiated with different vendors, different suppliers, credit periods. Some have 30 days, some have 90 days, some have simple terms, some have complex terms, all of that, right? And there's a whole huge back office setup that goes to generation of invoices, tracking of purchase orders, generating your AR statements, sending out, reconciling AP to AR, reconciling AP to ledger. So if you're an accountant, you would probably understand these aspects in a little bit more granularity. There's a lot of back office heavy lifting stuff happening at IBM's FP&A organization. So we kind of huddled together. We formed a core group of how we could solve this problem in terms of, and all of this led to a lot of disputes in arriving at and agreeing on balances, right? I mean, the supplier says you owe me so much. IBM says no, I don't owe you so much. The vendor says that we owe them so much, but IBM says no, 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 that's not receivable from us. So there's a lot of disputes, and both parties seem justified in their argument, and both parties seem right because there is somewhat of a contract. It's not a shake hand or a gentleman's agreement. There is a contract, but how do you kind of operationalize those contracts in a blockchain environment with the sole objective of creating transparency? Because if there is a dispute, I think the best medicine for that is trust and transparency, fair dealing, right? We talk about fair practices in corporate, right? We talk about anti-corruption practices. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, FCPA of the US, is a famous regulation that is very prescriptive in terms of how you approach such situations, right? And IBM, obviously, though IBM India Private Limited is a local registered entity here in India and governed by the Indian Companies Act. It also is a it also is a foreign subsidiary of IBM Global Corporation, which is governed by FCPA, and therefore the local entity also is governed by FCPA regulations as well. So there is an indirect compliance to the US regulators, while the ongoing compliance with the local regulator cannot be undermined as well. So the blockchain system actually created a lot of efficiencies in terms of creating trust, transparency, having ecosystem participants, having all the invoices, purchase orders ported from its legacy system into the distributed ledger, and a lot of algorithms running on it to actually look at disputes, arrive at balances, perform auto reconciliations, send auto reminders in case of delays or even defaults, readjust your AR/AP balances, re-report those corrected numbers, ensure that confirmation of balances are sent very frequently within the credit period and exceeding the credit period. So all of those, you don't see those things on the slide because I wanted to kind of articulate as to at the transaction level what kind of happened, because the slide may not represent the level one of what has been happening on the ground, the hands-on keyboard stuff. This probably talks about high level as to what the benefits are, but all those underlying level one transactional stuff led to almost a 30 to 35% reduction in back office costs for IBM internally, because it's increased throughput, increased operational efficiencies, increased reduction of cycle time, shrink time, all of that, right? So all of that created a lot of efficiency, a better relationship with vendors and suppliers. Actually, the vendors and suppliers were immensely happy and grateful that they felt IBM to be opening up to them. They felt that IBM is open for dispute resolution. They felt that there's a lot of trust and transparency created around reconciliation of balances, reporting of balances, seeking for confirmation of balances, issuing debit notes and credit notes, however the case may be, for adjustments and accruals. So all of that became quite transparent, quite open. It's a closed network, of course. It's not like the other consortiums that I was talking about, in which Axis, ICICI, Yes Bank, OEMs are involved. There's a far more closed network. There are different kinds of network that you could have as part of network exchanges. This was more of a closed network, where the primary node was IBM, and the other nodes were distributed amongst suppliers and contractors and vendors. So this was another interesting use case. So given the backdrop of the use cases that we have seen, given the backdrop of how the industry has paved way to embrace this technology, I think the road ahead is pretty bright. The road ahead is far more brighter than what it was a couple of years ago, given the lot of technology prowess and proficiency that has come to play, thereby also increasing the performance of transactions, making it more faster. You see some of those as deterrents here, right? I mean, clearly, I wanted to portray a picture that all is not rosy, and blockchain will not solve all the third world problems of the world. I think that's it is important to rebase and restate our understanding as far as any technology goes, and blockchain is no exception either, right? So there are inherent growing pains in this technology, right? For example, performance. It probably used to take about 20 minutes for a transaction to complete. Now it takes 12 minutes, depending on the technology that you use and depending on the fabric that you use, right? By fabric, I mean the underlying DLT technology. So there's no one size fits all approach for adopting and embracing this technology. But having said that, uh, interoperability among platforms is important, right? Because uh, the question is, how many such consortiums will we keep building? You can't have 500 consortiums operate in silos, because even those consortiums are consortiums, but they tend to operate in silos. So there is a limit to which the number of consortiums can be also built in this technology, right? You need to have more convergence of those consortiums, because eventually you will see common suppliers, common shippers, common transport operators, common vendors, common service providers. At a certain level, there is an amount of increasing amount of commonality uh, that actually is there, right? So I think that is something which we see that will pan out in the future. And obviously, for any technology or system or a business application to survive, uh, there must be a conducive regulatory climate, right? In any country, in any regime. Uh, a case in point is prior to 2008 global financial crisis, uh, and with Alan Greenspan at the helm in the US, at the Fed, we saw a lot of loosening up of certain policy regimes, like monetary policy being loosened up and all of that. And we knew the consequences of that through the GFC, 2008 GFC. And then what happened? You immediately go on to tightening those policies, right? At the moment, uh, policies don't exist or are loosened up, the system gets a freewheeling hand, and eventually to the point that it becomes frivolous. Then what happens? It causes a systemic event, God forbid, a financial crisis, a recession, and worst case, even a depression. What we're going through now is, of course, pandemic, and nothing caused or created by the financial markets or the vagaries of the markets. It's a different pandemic. But in 2008, it was created by the global housing market, the CDO, CMO, CLO market that traders were actually trading on, betting on, and creating huge debts, operating at 80s to 1 gearing or leverage, right? So it was a very systemic cancer, so to say. And then what happens is the regulators tighten the nose. They bring out more regulations. We see post 2008 increasing regulatory scrutiny on transactions, increasing regulatory scrutiny on market participants, systemically important financial institutions, SIFIs, right? So and now we saw a little bit of deregulation in the Western markets, given Mr. Trump's regime and given Mr. Trump's understanding of the world, coming from where he comes from. But uh, that's not going to be there forever, right? So along with economic cycles, along with trade cycles, along with business cycles, the regulatory regime also, the iron hand, also kind of adjusts itself to produce a more favorable or a conducive regulatory regime. And blockchain is one such technology, because earlier it was very confused. The market participants were kind of conveniently substituting Bitcoin for blockchain, right? Which is not the case, which is not correct, which is not the accurate portrayal. And there's a lot of speculative bubble that was built around cryptocurrency trading, which is pretty much banned by many regulators. Few are allowed, but many regulators are still not in favor of cryptocurrency trading and all of that, right? And some of the regulators are in a flux. They're like a cat on the wall. They don't want to say no, at the same time they don't want to say yes. So they're just waiting and watching as to what the consensus, regulatory consensus is broadly. So I think any adoption for new technology will take time. Blockchain is no exception either. And increasingly we're going to see brighter pastures, greener pastures, and a lot of pivots happening around this technology and the current existing model. So with that, I come to the conclusion of my presentation. I thank everyone for patiently listening, and if you have any questions, happy to answer them. Thank you.